I'm going to speak to it from the book of Daniel. I had an opportunity to write on Daniel. And I think that the chiastic literary structure of the book of Daniel can help us to understand why the book is laid out the way it is. So for instance, when we study Daniel closely, we see that the book is not in chronological order. And what I have in mind is the way that in chapter 5, this king of Babylon named Belshazzar dies. He's killed at the end of Daniel 5. But then in Daniel 7, we're back in the first year of King Belshazzar of Babylon. So it's clear that we're not moving, from his death back. We're not moving in chronological sequence. So when we look at Daniel, I think we find a chiastic structure. And the chiastic structure, one of the things that it does is it provides us with a mnemonic device for remembering the book's contents. Another thing it does is it shows us how the corresponding parts of the book are mutually interpretive, and then it gives us the central part of the book, which in many of these chiastic structures, that's the most important thing that happens, what's at the very center. So in the opening chapter, Daniel and his friends are exiled from the Holy Land. They are taken into captivity in Babylon. In Daniel chapters 10 through 12, I think really what that whole unit is dealing with is the end of the exile. And then in Daniel chapter 2, Daniel interprets this dream that King Nebuchadnezzar has. He first discerns what the dream is, and then he explains the interpretation of the dream. And the dream has to do with the way that there are going to be these 4 kingdoms, and then the kingdom of God is going to come. Daniel 7 through 9, in many ways, is about the same thing. In Daniel 7, it's not these 4 pieces of a statue like it is in Daniel 2, but it's these 4 beasts. And in the same way that the 4 parts of the statue represent 4 kingdoms, the 4 beasts represent 4 kingdoms. And then in the same way that after the 4 kingdoms in Daniel 2 comes the kingdom of God, after the 4 beasts in Daniel 7, dominion is given to one like the Son of Man, and he is the Davidic king over the kingdom of God. A similar thing happens in Daniel 8 and Daniel 9, where you're dealing with the time period between Daniel's own day down to the coming of the kingdom of God. So I would say that Daniel 2 corresponds to Daniel 7 through 9, and they're all about what's going to happen between Daniel's time and the coming of the kingdom of God. Daniel 3 is where Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, are put into the fiery furnace, and that corresponds to Daniel 6, where Daniel himself is thrown into the lion's den. And in those 2 narratives have a lot of common features. For instance, in the fiery furnace in Daniel 3, they see one like a son of the gods, this angelic heavenly being who is in the fire, and they speak of how God sent His angel to deliver His servants. In Daniel 6, it's stated that God sent His angel to close the mouths of the lions. So in both cases, the people of God are threatened with death, and in both cases, God sends His angel to deliver them, and in both cases, the 3 friends and Daniel are said to have believed the Lord, and He delivered them. So in Daniel 4, Nebuchadnezzar is humbled, he's driven crazy, and he goes out into the wilderness for a period of time, and then he's eventually restored when he recognizes that the Most High rules in the affairs of men. In Daniel 5, Belshazzar is confronted with the writing on the wall, which he cannot interpret, and he too is humbled before this manifestation of God's power, and then at the end of the chapter, he's killed. So what this does is it allows us to see that the wicked powers of the earth in Daniel 4 and 5, Nebuchadnezzar and Belshazzar, they really cannot succeed against God's people. Because even if they try to, say, throw those 3 young men into the fiery furnace or throw Daniel into the lion's den, God can deliver His people from these wicked, seemingly all-powerful kings. And then the visions of the 4 kingdoms and then the kingdom of God in Daniel 2 and Daniel 7 through 9, these visions communicate that God knows exactly what's going to happen, and He knows exactly when these powers are going to arise. And as Daniel 2 says, He sets up kings and takes down kings, and he changes the times and the seasons. The Lord is in control, and the Lord knows what's going on. So, Daniel 1, even if God's people are exiled, Daniel 10 through 12, God is going to bring them back from exile, and in Daniel 12 in particular, he's going to raise them from the dead and restore them to his presence. So this allows us to quickly summarize the whole message of Daniel. We can say something like this. The book of Daniel is about the way that though God's people are exiles and strangers, Daniel 1, Daniel 10, God is going to raise them from the dead, and God knows exactly what's going to unfold across the scope of human history, and He has the power to protect His people from fiery furnace and lion's den, and He's going to humble all the proud rulers of the earth. So this is a beautiful chiastic structure, and it really highlights God's power, God's plan, and it says to God's persecuted people, hold fast, believe what the Lord has promised, trust Him to deliver you. He has delivered His people in the past, and even if you get killed by being faithful to God, He will raise you from the dead, Daniel 12:2.